The silverware froze midair when my mother-in-law leaned across the Sunday dinner table, eyes sharp, voice louder than the clink of wineglasses. "You're not good enough for our son," she said, slowly, deliberately, like she wanted it to bruise. The room went silent. My husband didn't defend me. He stared at his plate. And at that moment, something inside me went cold. Before we get into what happened next, drop a comment and let me know where you're listening from right now. I want to see how far this story reaches. The roast beef sat in the middle of the table, steam rising like smoke signals. Around me, the Ashford family carried on their Sunday ritual with practiced precision. Crystal glasses, linen napkins, polite conversation that felt like a performance. I was cutting my meat when my mother-in-law, Patricia, set down her fork. The sound echoed. Everyone looked up. She was staring directly at me, her face arranged in something that almost looked like concern but felt like a trap. "June," she said, her voice carrying across the table. "We need to discuss something important." My stomach tightened. My husband, Daniel, shifted beside me. His father, Richard, folded his hands. Patricia's lips pressed into a thin line. Then she said it. 6 words that landed like stones. "You're not good enough for our son." The air left the room. I waited for Daniel to speak, to correct her, to defend me. He didn't. He just kept staring at his plate, jaw tight, like he was solving a math problem in his head. Patricia continued, her voice calm, measured. "We've been patient, we've tried, but Daniel deserves someone from his world, someone who understands our family's position." Richard nodded slowly. "It's nothing personal, June, just reality." My hands were shaking. I placed my knife down carefully, afraid I'd drop it. I looked around the table. Daniel's sister, Caroline, looked away. No one met my eyes. No one moved. The humiliation was complete, and I realized something chilling. This wasn't spontaneous. This was planned. The car ride home felt like drowning. Daniel drove in silence, hands gripping the steering wheel, eyes locked on the road. I sat in the passenger seat, replaying every second of that dinner, every word, every look, every silence. After 10 minutes, I finally spoke. "You knew." My voice was steady, which surprised me. Daniel exhaled. "June, they're just old-fashioned. They'll come around." "You knew they were going to say that." He glanced at me, then back at the road. "I didn't think they'd say it like that." "You knew." He said nothing. That silence confirmed everything. He had known his parents planned to humiliate me, and he had let me walk into that room anyway. He had sat there, fork in hand, and watched them tear me apart. "They're my parents," he said finally, like that explained anything. "I can't just cut them off. I'm your wife, and they're my family." I turned to look out the window. The streetlights blurred past. Something inside me shifted. Not anger, not sadness, something colder. Something sharper. I had spent 3 years trying to fit into the Ashford family, smiling through passive-aggressive comments, laughing at jokes that weren't funny, dressing the way Patricia suggested, speaking carefully, staying small. And tonight I learned the truth. It would never be enough because they didn't want me to fit in. They wanted me gone. When we pulled into the driveway, Daniel reached for my hand. I pulled away. "June, please, let's just forget tonight happened." I looked at him. Really looked at him, and I realized I was married to a man who would always choose them over me. "Okay," I said quietly. "We'll forget it." But I wouldn't. My name is June Callahan, or it was before I married into the Ashford family and became June Ashford. I grew up in a small town where my parents ran a hardware store. We weren't rich, but we were solid. My dad taught me to fix things. My mom taught me to read people. I got a scholarship to college, graduated with honors, and built a career in corporate communications. I worked hard. I earned every promotion. By the time I met Daniel at a charity event 5 years ago, I was managing a team of 12 and pulling in a 6-figure salary. I didn't need his money. I didn't need his family's name. I fell in love with him because he seemed kind, because he laughed easily, because when we were alone, he made me feel seen. His family was a bonus I didn't ask for. The Ashfords were old money. The kind of family that had buildings named after them. Richard sat on corporate boards. Patricia chaired fundraising committees. They moved through the world like they owned it. And maybe they did. When Daniel first introduced me to his parents, Patricia looked me up and down like I was a coach she was considering returning. Richard asked where I went to school, then nodded politely when I answered, his face blank. Caroline, Daniel's younger sister, smiled but said nothing. I told myself it didn't matter. I told myself they'd warm up eventually. I was wrong. For 3 years, I tried. I attended their dinners. I laughed at their jokes. I wore the right clothes and said the right things. But I was never right enough. And tonight, they finally said it out loud. I wasn't good enough, and my husband agreed. The first red flag came 6 months after Daniel proposed. We were at brunch with his family at their country club. I was talking about a campaign I'd just launched when Patricia interrupted. "That's nice, dear," she said, her smile tight. "But don't you think it's time to focus on building a family? A career is fine for now, but Daniel will need a wife who can focus on what matters." I blinked. "My career does matter." "Of course," Richard added smoothly. "But the Ashford name comes with responsibilities. Hosting, charity work, maintaining appearances, that's a full-time job." Daniel said nothing. He just refilled his coffee. I laughed it off, told myself they were just old-fashioned. A few months later, Patricia suggested I change my hairstyle. "Something more elegant," she said, "more fitting for the family." Then she suggested I update my wardrobe. "You're representing the Ashford name now, June. Image matters." Then she started correcting the way I spoke at dinner parties. "Too loud, dear. Softer, more refined." Each comment came wrapped in concern. Each suggestion was framed as help. But underneath, the message was clear. I wasn't good enough as I was. I needed to be remade, reshaped, reduced. I told Daniel how I felt. He hugged me and said, "They're just trying to help. They love you." But love doesn't feel like sandpaper. Love doesn't ask you to disappear. I started ignoring the comments. Smiling politely, nodding. But inside, I was keeping track. Every dig, every dismissal. Every moment Daniel chose silence over defending me. I didn't know it then, but I was building a case. Not for revenge, for clarity. At 2:17 in the morning, I was still awake. Daniel was snoring beside me, peaceful, unbothered. I stared at the ceiling, replaying the dinner. One sentence wouldn't leave my head. "We've been patient." That word, patient. Like I was a problem they'd been tolerating. Like my presence required endurance. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized something worse. Patricia hadn't hesitated. She hadn't stumbled over her words. She had delivered that line with the confidence of someone who had practiced it. This wasn't a spontaneous outburst. This was a planned intervention, which meant they had discussed this. Multiple times, behind closed doors. They had sat together, probably over coffee or wine, and talked about how to get rid of me, how to push me out, how to convince Daniel I wasn't worth keeping. And Daniel had known, maybe not the exact words, maybe not the exact moment, but he knew something was coming. And he had said nothing. I turned to look at him, sleeping soundly, and felt something inside me detach. Not love dying, just clarity arriving. I had spent 3 years trying to earn their approval. 3 years of shrinking myself. 3 years believing that if I just worked harder, smiled wider, stayed quieter, they would accept me. But they never would, because this wasn't about me. It was about control. They wanted Daniel's life to look a certain way, and I didn't fit the picture. So they were erasing me. I got out of bed and went to the kitchen, made tea, sat in the dark, and I made a decision. I wasn't going to fight them. I wasn't going to scream or beg or cry. I was going to watch, listen, document, and let them show me exactly who they were. 3 weeks after the dinner, something shifted at work. I had been up for a promotion, senior director of communications. I had led the pitch that landed our biggest client. My performance reviews were spotless. My team loved me. The role was mine. Everyone knew it. Then the email came. "We've decided to move in a different direction. The position has been filled internally by someone with more strategic alignment." No explanation, no meeting, just a polite rejection. I sat at my desk, staring at the screen. Strategic alignment. I had built half the strategies this company used. I asked my manager, Kim, what happened. She looked uncomfortable. "It came from above me, June. I don't have details." "Above you, from who?" She hesitated. "The board." That word landed cold. The board, our company's board, included 7 members. I knew their names. I'd researched them when I first joined. And one of those names was Richard Ashford, my father-in-law. I went home that night and said nothing to Daniel. I went to my laptop and pulled up the company's public filings. Richard had joined the board 2 years ago, right after I started working there. I thought it was a coincidence, a small world. Now I wasn't sure. I opened my work email and searched for anything involving the promotion. Meeting notes, recommendations, feedback, and buried in a forwarded chain, I found something. An email from an address I didn't recognize, sent to the executive team 3 days before the promotion decision. "Concerns have been raised regarding Ms. Callahan's long-term commitment to the organization. Recommend delaying advancement until stability is confirmed." No signature, no details, just enough to plant doubt. I stared at that email for 20 minutes. Then I saved it, printed it, filed it. Someone had sabotaged me, and I was starting to understand who. I started paying attention, not in an obvious way, just watching, listening, connecting dots. 2 weeks later, Daniel mentioned over dinner that his father was helping with some professional connections. "He's really well connected, June. If you ever need advice, you should talk to him." I smiled. "That's nice." But inside, alarm bells were ringing. Richard Ashford didn't help people. He controlled them. I went back through my calendar. Over the past year, there had been 3 major projects where decisions felt off. Budgets cut, timelines changed, clients reassigned. At the time, I thought it was corporate politics. Now I wondered if it was something else. I called an old colleague who had left the company 6 months ago. We met for coffee. "Did anything weird happen before you left?" I asked. She stirred her latte. "Define weird." "Interference, decisions that didn't make sense." She looked at me carefully. "You're asking if someone was blocking you. Was someone blocking me?" She leaned in. "June, I don't have proof, but there were whispers. Someone on the board had concerns about you. They said you were a distraction, that your personal life was affecting your judgment." My hands tightened around my cup. "Did they say who?" "No, but it started after you got married." I thanked her and left. My mind was racing. This wasn't just about the promotion. This was a pattern. They had been quietly dismantling my career, piece by piece, making me look unstable, uncommitted, unreliable. And they were doing it from a position I couldn't touch. The board, I went home and didn't say a word. I just smiled when Daniel asked how my day was. That night, I started a document. Dates, emails, decisions, conversations. I wasn't building a case for revenge. I was building a map, and every road led back to them. Sunday brunch, 2 months after the dinner. Patricia had called to invite us, her voice sweet like nothing had happened. "Let's put that unpleasantness behind us," she'd said. "Family is family." I agreed to go. Daniel was relieved. He thought I was moving on. I wasn't. I was observing. We arrived at their estate at noon. The table was set with fresh flowers and pastries. Patricia greeted me with a hug that felt like a threat. "June, darling, so glad you came." Richard shook my hand, his grip firm, his eyes cold. Caroline was already seated, scrolling through her phone. I smiled, said all the right things, complimented the scones, laughed at Richard's joke about the stock market, but I was watching. Patricia's smile was too wide. Richard's tone was too casual. They were performing, just like I was. Midway through the meal, Patricia turned to me. "June, have you given any thought to stepping back from work? Now that you and Daniel are settled, it might be time to focus on family." I sipped my tea. "Actually, I'm busier than ever. Great projects are coming up." Her smile tightened. "I just worry you're spreading yourself too thin. Marriage requires attention." "So does a career," Richard chimed in. "Of course, but priorities shift. Daniel's future is important. The Ashford legacy matters." I nodded, smiled, said nothing, but I saw it, the way they exchanged glances. The way Caroline smirked into her napkin. They thought I was weak. They thought I would fold. They had no idea I was taking notes. That night, I added everything to my document, every comment, every look, every unspoken threat. I wasn't angry anymore. I was clear. They were trying to erase me. And I was going to let them try, because arrogance makes people careless, and I needed them carelessly. I became meticulous. Every email I sent at work, I copied to a personal account. Every meeting where decisions felt wrong, I documented. Every time Daniel mentioned his parents helping with something, I noted it. I wasn't looking for revenge. I was looking for the truth, and truth requires evidence. I started reviewing the company's board meeting notes. They were public record, buried in investor disclosures. Dry, boring, but detailed. In the minutes from 3 months ago, I found a line. "Discussion regarding personnel stability in the communications division. Concerns noted. Further review recommended." The date matched exactly with when my promotion was delayed. I pulled up Richard's bio on the company website. His areas of influence included corporate governance and personnel oversight. He wasn't just on the board. He had authority over hearing and advancement decisions. He had used that authority to block me. I felt something settle in my chest. Not anger, certainty. I called a lawyer, not for a lawsuit, just for advice. "I think my father-in-law is interfering with my career. Is that legal?" The lawyer, a sharp woman named Claire, listened carefully. "If he's using his board position to settle personal grievances, that's a conflict of interest, potentially actionable. What would I need to prove it?" "Documentation, emails, patterns." Evidence that decisions were made based on personal bias rather than professional merit. I thanked her, hung up, and realized I already had most of what I needed. That night, Daniel asked why I was so quiet. "Just tired," I said. He kissed my forehead. "You work too hard." I smiled. But inside, I was thinking about how easily he dismissed my exhaustion, how he never asked why I was tired. He never asked what his family had cost me. He just wanted me to be fine, to be easy, to be quiet. I found the document by accident. I was looking for our insurance papers in Daniel's home office when I saw a folder labeled Family Matters. Inside was a letter, drafted by Richard's attorney, addressed to Daniel. The date was 2 weeks before the Sunday dinner. I read it standing up, my hands shaking. It was a prenuptial amendment, a clause that would limit my claim to any Ashford assets if we divorced. It also included a section about reputation management and family legacy protection. At the bottom, in Richard's handwriting, was a note. "Discuss with June after the conversation. Make it clear this is non-negotiable. If she refuses, we proceed with alternative measures." Alternative measures. I read that line 3 times. They weren't just trying to push me out. They were planning for it. They had a strategy, a timeline, a backup plan. And Daniel had this letter, which meant he knew. I put the letter back exactly where I found it, closed the drawer. I walked out of the office, and felt the last piece of my heart detach from this family. That night I couldn't sleep, not because I was hurt, but because I finally understood the full scope of what I was dealing with. They weren't just dismissive in-laws. They were strategic, calculated, ruthless. They were trying to erase me legally, professionally, and emotionally, and they thought I was too weak to notice. I got out of bed at 3 a.m. and went to my laptop. I opened the document I'd been building, added the letter, added dates, added every single piece of evidence I had, and I realized something important. They had crossed a line, not just ethically, legally. Richard's interference at my company was a conflict of interest. The prenuptial amendment drafted without my knowledge was potentially fraudulent. They thought they were untouchable, but arrogance creates blind spots. And I was standing in theirs. My marriage was unraveling, not loudly, quietly. Like a thread pulled slowly until the whole thing comes apart. Daniel and I barely talked anymore. When we did, it was surface level, safe. He asked about my day. I said fine. He told me about work. I nodded. But underneath, there was a distance neither of us acknowledged. One night, I asked him directly, "Did you know your father was blocking my promotion?" He looked up from his phone, startled. "What?" "Richard. He's on the board at my company. Did you know he interfered with my career?" Daniel's face shifted. Confusion, then defensiveness. "That's ridiculous, June. My father wouldn't do that." "He did. You're being paranoid." I stared at him. "I have emails, Daniel, evidence he used his position to sabotage me." Daniel stood up. "My father has integrity. If he made a professional decision, it was because it was the right call. Not everything is about you." That sentence landed like a slap. Not everything is about you. I had been humiliated, sabotaged, dismissed. And my husband thought I was being selfish. I didn't argue, I just nodded. "Okay." He softened, reached for my hand. "June, I know my parents are difficult, but they're not evil, they're just protective. Of you, not me," he sighed. "You're my wife, that makes you family." "Does it?" He didn't answer. That silence told me everything. Daniel had chosen, and it wasn't me. I went to bed that night knowing my marriage was over, not officially, not yet, but emotionally it was done. And I was okay with that. Because I had stopped needing him to save me. I was going to save myself. The email came on a Tuesday morning. The subject line read, "Opportunity Director of Global Communications." It was from a recruiter I'd worked with years ago. She was reaching out about a position at a competitor, bigger company, better pay, more autonomy. And here's the important part, their board had no connection to the Ashford family. I read the email 3 times, then I responded, "I'm interested, let's talk." 2 days later, I had a phone interview. The following week, I flew to their headquarters. The role was perfect. Strategy, leadership, influence, everything I had been working toward, everything Richard had tried to block. The hearing manager, a woman named Susan, was direct. "We've heard great things about you, June. Why are you looking to leave your current company?" I paused, chose my words carefully. "I've hit a ceiling. I'm ready for a role where my work speaks louder than politics." She nodded. "We don't tolerate politics here. We promote based on merit." By the end of the meeting, I knew I had the job. They offered it to me a week later. The salary was 40% higher than what I was making. The title was prestigious. The autonomy was real. I accepted immediately. But I didn't tell Daniel. Not yet. I needed this to be mine, untouched, uncontaminated by his family's interference. I gave my notice at work quietly. My manager, Kim, looked devastated. June, if this is about the promotion, I can escalate it. It's not, I said. It's about growth. She hugged me. They're losing a great leader. I smiled. But inside, I was thinking about Richard, about how he'd find out I was leaving, about how he'd realize he had pushed me right out of his reach and into something better. Patricia called 2 days after I gave my notice. June, darling, let's have dinner, just the family. We'd love to reconnect. Her voice was warm, too warm. I knew what this was. Richard had found out I was leaving, and they were panicking. I agreed to come. Daniel was thrilled. See, I told you they'd come around. I smiled, said nothing. The dinner was at their house. The table was set with candles and wine. Patricia greeted me with a hug. Richard shook my hand, his grip just a little too tight. We sat down, made small talk. Patricia complimented my dress. Richard asked about work. And then halfway through the appetizer, Patricia said it. June, we owe you an apology. I looked up. Daniel looked relieved. Patricia continued, her voice soft, practiced. We've been too hard on you, too critical. We just want what's best for Daniel, but we see now that you make him happy, and that's what matters. Richard nodded. Family is everything. We'd like to start over. I smiled. Appreciate that. Patricia reached across the table and squeezed my hand. We're so glad you're staying at your company. Richard mentioned you were considering leaving. We'd hate to see you make a rash decision. There it was, the real reason for the dinner. They didn't want me to leave, because if I left, Richard lost his leverage. If I stayed, they could keep controlling me. I looked at Patricia, then at Richard, then at Daniel, who was smiling, relieved, thinking everything was fixed, and I made a decision. I was going to let them think they won. You're right, I said. Family is everything. I'm glad we're starting over. Patricia beamed. Richard relaxed. Daniel reached for my hand under the table, and I smiled. Because they had no idea I had already accepted the other job. They had no idea I was already gone. They thought they'd won, but I had just walked out the door. They were just too arrogant to notice. The Ashfords had a fatal flaw. They underestimated everyone who wasn't them. They believed money equaled intelligence. Status equaled power. Legacy equaled invincibility. They thought I was weak because I was quiet. They thought I was controllable because I smiled. They looked at me and saw someone small, someone manageable. Someone who would eventually disappear. That was their mistake, because while they were busy performing superiority, I was learning their systems. I knew how corporate boards worked. I knew how reputations were built and destroyed. I knew how power actually functioned. And I knew their biggest vulnerability. Everything they valued, status, reputation, influence, was built on perception. And perception is fragile. Over the next 2 weeks, I finalized my transition plan. My last day at the old company was set. My start date at the new company was locked in, but I wasn't just changing jobs. I was removing myself entirely from their sphere of control. I closed our joint bank account and opened my own. I updated my emergency contacts. I changed my passwords, small moves, quiet moves, moves that would seem insignificant until later. Daniel noticed nothing. He was too busy being relieved that his parents and I were getting along. One night, he actually said, I'm so glad you gave them another chance. I looked at him, really looked at him, and I felt nothing, not anger, not sadness, just distance. Me too, I said. But inside, I was thinking about how easily he believed the performance, how quickly he accepted the surface. He didn't ask what I was thinking. He didn't ask if I was okay. He just wanted everything to look fine, and that was enough for him. I stopped explaining myself. That was the shift. I stopped trying to make Daniel understand. I stopped defending my decisions. I stopped asking for his support. When he asked about my day, I smiled and said, good. When Patricia called, I answered politely and kept it brief. When Richard made comments about my career, I nodded and changed the subject. I became smooth, unreachable, calm. Daniel noticed. You seem different, he said one night. Different how? I don't know, distant. I looked at him. I'm just focused. He frowned. Focused on what? Myself. He didn't know what to say to that. The truth was I had detached, not angrily, not bitterly, just completely. I had spent 3 years trying to make this family accept me, trying to make Daniel defend me, trying to fit into a space that was never meant for me. I was done trying. I had a new job starting in 2 weeks. I had evidence of Richard's interference saved in 3 separate locations. I had clarity about who these people were, and I had a plan, not for revenge, for exit, but something was about to surface. Something I hadn't planned for, something that would change everything. It started with a phone call. My phone rang at 9 p.m. on a Thursday. The number was blocked. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. "June Callahan?" a man's voice asked. "Yes. This is Marcus Webb. I'm an investigative journalist. I'm working on a story about corporate board misconduct. Your name came up. Do you have a few minutes to talk?" My heart stopped. "How did you get my number?" "I'd rather explain in person. Can we meet?" I hesitated. Then I said yes, because I realized something. The truth was coming, whether I was ready or not. We met at a coffee shop downtown. Marcus was in his 40s, tired eyes, wrinkled shirt, the look of someone who'd spent too many years chasing stories. He ordered black coffee. I ordered nothing. He got straight to it. "I've been investigating conflicts of interest on corporate boards. Your father-in-law's name came up." I stayed quiet. He continued. "Richard Ashford sits on 3 boards. 2 of them have employees with personal connections to him. You're one of them. I found emails suggesting he interfered with personnel decisions. I'm trying to confirm the pattern." "Why me?" I asked. "Why are you telling me this?" He leaned forward. "Because I think you have documentation, and I think you've been hurt by this. If you're willing to go on record, we can expose this." I sat back, thought carefully. What happens if I do? It becomes public. The companies investigate. If there's evidence of misconduct, he could lose his board positions. His reputation takes a hit, maybe legal consequences. I looked at Marcus. Then I made a decision. "I need 24 hours. He nodded, handed me his card. "Think about it, but June, this doesn't go away. If I don't publish it, someone else will. These things have a way of surfacing." I left the coffee shop and sat in my car for 20 minutes. This was it. The moment where I had to choose. I could stay quiet, protect the family, keep the peace, or I could tell the truth and let the consequences land where they belonged. I drove home. Daniel was on the couch watching TV. "Where were you?" he asked. "Coffee with a friend." He nodded, didn't ask who. I went to the bedroom, pulled up the files on my laptop, every email, every note, every piece of evidence, and I realized something. I didn't want revenge, but I wanted justice. I wanted the truth to matter. I emailed Marcus. "Let's meet again. I have what you need." The article was published 3 weeks later. The headline read, "Corporate board member accused of using position to settle personal disputes." It was detailed, thorough, devastating. Marcus had done his homework. He interviewed former employees, reviewed board meeting notes, cross-referenced timelines, and he quoted me, anonymously. But anyone who knew the story would know it was me. The article described how Richard had used his board influence to block my promotion. How he'd raised concerns about my stability without evidence. How he'd violated conflict of interest policies. And it didn't stop there. Marcus found 2 other cases. Employees at other companies where Richard sat on boards. People who had been quietly pushed out after personal disagreements. It was a pattern. A documented, undeniable pattern. The fallout was immediate. 2 of the boards launched internal investigations. Richard was placed on administrative leave. His name was trending on LinkedIn, not in a good way. Patricia called me hysterical. "How could you do this to us, to Daniel?" "I didn't do anything," I said calmly. "I just told the truth. You've destroyed this family." "No," I said. "Richard did that." She hung up. Daniel came home that night, pale, furious. "Did you talk to that journalist?" "Yes." "Why would you do that?" I looked at him. "Because your father sabotaged my career, because he used his power to hurt me. Because no one in this family cared. He's my father, and I'm your wife." We stared at each other, and in that silence I saw the final truth. Daniel would always choose them. No matter what they did, no matter how wrong they were, blood would always win. "I'm filing for divorce," I said. His face went white. "June, don't do this." "I already did." I walked out of the room, and for the first time in 3 years I felt free. I thought the worst had passed. The article was published. The investigations were underway. I had filed for divorce. I thought I could finally move forward. Then I got a letter. From Richard's attorney. It was thick, legal, threatening. Inside was a lawsuit. Richard was suing me for defamation. Claiming I had knowingly provided false information to damage his reputation. Claiming emotional distress. Claiming financial harm. He was asking for $2 million. I sat at my kitchen table, staring at the papers. My hands were shaking, not from fear, from rage. He had sabotaged my career, humiliated me, tried to erase me. And now he was suing me for telling the truth. I called Claire, my lawyer. She reviewed the lawsuit and sighed. "This is a SLAPP suit, strategic lawsuit against public participation. It's designed to intimidate you into silence." "Can he win?" No, truth is an absolute defense against defamation. But defending yourself will cost money, time, energy, that's the point. What do? You fight and you counterclaim. I hung up, took a breath, and realized something. They weren't done trying to destroy me, but I wasn't done fighting. That night I went through every document I had, every email, every note, every piece of evidence showing Richard's misconduct, and I sent it all to Claire. File the counterclaim, I said. Let's finish this. The next morning I woke up to 17 missed calls, all from Daniel. I didn't call back. I didn't need to because I knew what he wanted. He wanted me to drop the lawsuit, to protect his family, to disappear quietly. But I was done disappearing. This wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about making sure they couldn't do this to anyone else. Something strange happened. I slept. For the first time in months, I slept through the night. No nightmares, no replaying conversations, no anxiety twisting in my chest. I woke up at 7 a.m., made coffee, and sat by the window. Outside, the city was waking up. People walking dogs, cars passing. Life is moving forward, and I was part of it, not stuck, not frozen, moving. The lawsuit was ongoing, my divorce was being finalized. My new job was thriving, I was leading projects. Building a team, being respected. And I wasn't thinking about the Ashfords every minute of every day. I had let the processes unfold, the investigations, the legal proceedings, the truth. I wasn't controlling it, I was just letting it happen because the truth doesn't need to be forced. It just needs space to surface. 2 weeks later, Claire called. The company completed their investigation. Richard violated multiple conflict of interest policies. He's been removed from the board, permanently. I exhaled, and the lawsuit. His attorney reached out. They want to settle, drop everything, no admission of guilt, but they'll withdraw the lawsuit and cover your legal fees. No, I said, no settlement, I want this on record. Claire paused. June, the settlement is clean, it's over. I don't want it clean, I want it to be true. She was quiet. Then she said, okay, we will go to trial. I hung up. And for the first time, I smiled, not because I was happy, but because I was certain. They wanted to bury this quietly, to make it go away, to erase their mistakes like they tried to erase me, but I wasn't going away. I was standing still, and the truth was standing with me. The call came on a Monday morning. Claire's voice was different, urgent, excited. June, you need to sit down. I was already sitting. What happened? The second company finished their investigation. They found evidence that Richard had been compensated by a third party to influence personnel decisions. It's not just a conflict of interest, it's bribery. My breath caught. Bribery. Yes, a consulting firm paid him to push out certain executives to make room for their clients. You weren't the only target. There were 5 others across 3 companies. I couldn't speak. Claire continued. This is criminal, June. Federal investigators are involved now. Richard's attorney called this morning. They're dropping the lawsuit completely. They want to avoid criminal charges becoming public alongside the civil case. I felt something crack open inside my chest. Not relief, not victory, just the truth, finally surfacing, undeniable. What happens now? I asked. Now, Claire said. Now you win. But I didn't feel like I'd won. I felt like I'd survived. Like I'd walked through fire and come out the other side. Not because I was strong, but because I refused to stay silent. That night, I sat on my couch with a glass of wine and thought about the past 3 years. All the dinners, all the insults, all the moments I swallowed my voice to keep the peace. And I realized something. The fight wasn't about proving I was good enough. It was about proving they weren't untouchable. And the truth had done that. Not me, just the truth. My phone buzzed, a text from Daniel. Can we talk? I stared at it for a long time. Then I deleted it. There was nothing left to say. The news broke on Thursday. Federal investigators had formally charged Richard Ashford with bribery and corruption. The article was on the front page of the business section. His photo, his name, his fall. Patricia released a statement through their attorney. We are shocked and disappointed. We believe in Richard's integrity and will support him through this difficult time. But privately, the family was unraveling. I heard through mutual friends that Caroline had distanced herself. That Patricia had stopped attending charity events. That their country club membership had been quietly revoked. Richard's board positions were gone. His consulting contracts were terminated. His reputation, the thing he valued most, was destroyed. Not by me, by his own choices. By years of believing he was above consequences. The companies he'd hurt started reaching out to the employees he'd targeted, offering apologies, settlements, reinstatements. I received a call from my old company. They wanted me back. Double the salary. full creative control. A formal apology from the CEO. I thanked them and declined. I've moved on, I said, and I had. My new role was everything I needed: respect, autonomy, space to grow. I didn't need their apology, I just needed them to leave me alone, but the fallout continued. Richard's trial was set for 6 months out. Legal experts said he'd likely face prison time. Patricia filed for separation. The estate went up for sale. Everything they'd built, the legacy, the name, the image, was collapsing. Not because I tore it down, because it was built on lies, and lies don't last. One evening, I got an email from Caroline. "I'm sorry for everything, I should have said something." I read it twice. Then I deleted it. Apologies don't undo damage. They just make the person apologizing feel better. I didn't need her sorry, I needed her gone. Daniel showed up at my apartment. I didn't let him in. We stood in the hallway, the door cracked open, the chain lock still in place. He looked terrible. Thin, tired, broken. "June, please, can we talk?" "No. I made a mistake. I should have defended you. I should have protected you. I see that now." I looked at him, really looked at him, and I felt nothing. "You had 3 years to see it, Daniel. You chose not to." I was scared. They're my parents. I didn't know what to do. "You could have chosen me." His eyes filled with tears. "I'm choosing you now. It's too late." He reached through the gap in the door. I stepped back. "June, I love you." "No, you don't," I said quietly. "You love the idea of me, the version of me that stayed quiet, that didn't cause problems, but I'm not that person anymore. I can change. I don't want you to change, I want you to leave." He stood there, shoulders sagging, face crumbling, and for a second I felt pity, not love, just pity. He had tied his identity to his family so tightly that when they fell, he fell with them. He had no foundation of his own, no beliefs, no boundaries, just loyalty to people who didn't deserve it. "Goodbye, Daniel," I said, and I closed the door. I heard him stand there for a moment, then his footsteps, then silence. I went to the window and watched him walk to his car, watched him sit there for 10 minutes, head in his hands, then watched him drive away, and I felt the final thread snap. We were done, not just legally, emotionally, completely. I was free. The divorce was finalized 3 weeks later. I didn't ask for alimony, didn't fight for assets. I just wanted my name back. June Callahan, clean, mine, untouched by them. 6 months after the original Sunday dinner, I found myself at another Sunday meal. But this time, it was different. I was at a restaurant with my team from work. We just closed a massive campaign, the biggest of my career. We were celebrating, laughing, sharing stories, and I realized something. This was what family was supposed to feel like. Support, respect, celebration without conditions. My phone buzzed, a calendar reminder. Ashford family dinner declined. I smiled, deleted the reminder, and put my phone away. Later that week, a mutual friend mentioned that Patricia had tried to host a family dinner. Just her, Richard, Caroline, and Daniel, trying to maintain some sense of normalcy. But no one came. Caroline was in Europe. Daniel didn't respond. Even Richard, out on bail, didn't show. The family had fractured. Not because of me, because they had built their foundation on control, not love. And when control fails, there's nothing left. I thought about that Sunday dinner 6 months ago. The silverware is freezing. Patricia's voice, Daniel's silence, the humiliation. And I realized it was the best thing that ever happened to me, because it forced me to see the truth. It forced me to stop hoping they'd change. It forced me to stop shrinking myself. It gave me clarity, and clarity is freedom. I heard through the same mutual friend that Patricia had reached out to Daniel, asking if there was any way to fix things with me. Daniel apparently said no, that I was too angry. I laughed when I heard that. I wasn't angry. I was awake, and they couldn't survive someone who saw them clearly. They lost everything, not overnight, slowly, piece by piece. Richard lost his trial, 3 years in federal prison. The estate sold for half its value to cover legal fees. Patricia moved to a small condo in a different state. Caroline changed her last name. Daniel's career stalled. No one wanted to hire the son of a convicted criminal. Their social circle vanished. The charity board stopped calling. The country club connections disappeared. Everything they valued, status, reputation, influence, gone. And none of it was because I destroyed them. It was because they destroyed themselves. They believed they were untouchable. They believed rules didn't apply to them. They believed they could control people, manipulate systems, and never face consequences. They were wrong. I didn't have to ruin them. I just had to stop protecting them. I stopped being the quiet daughter-in-law who absorbed their insults. I stopped covering for their corruption. I stopped pretending everything was fine. And when I stepped back, the truth rushed in. And the truth was devastating, because the truth always is, when it's been hidden for too long. Meanwhile, my life expanded. I got promoted again, senior vice president. I bought a house, small but mine. I reconnected with old friends, made new ones. I started painting again, something I'd given up when I married Daniel. I traveled, laughed, breathed, and I never once looked back. People asked if I felt guilty, if I regretted exposing Richard, if I wished I'd handled it differently. No, I didn't ruin a family, I revealed one. There's a difference. Ruining requires malice, revealing just requires honesty. And honesty isn't cruelty, it's clear. The Ashfords wanted me to disappear, to shrink, to stay silent. Instead, I stood still and let their own actions speak. My name is June Callahan, not June Ashford. Not anymore. I know my worth now, not because someone gave it to me, but because I stopped letting people take it away. 3 years ago, I sat at a Sunday dinner and heard the words, "You're not good enough for our son." And I believed them. I believed I needed to try harder, be better, prove myself. I was wrong. I was always good enough. They just needed me to believe I wasn't, because keeping people small is how insecure people feel big. Today, I woke up in my own house. I made my own coffee, drove to my own office, led my own team, and I didn't think about the Ashfords once. Not Patricia's voice, not Richard's manipulation, not Daniel's silence. They don't occupy space in my mind anymore. They're just a chapter I closed, a lesson I learned, a fire I walked through. Last week, I got an email from Daniel. The subject line read, "I'm sorry." I didn't open it, I just archived it, because apologies don't undo damage. They just make the person apologizing feel better. And I don't need Daniel to feel better, I need to feel better. And I do. I'm thriving, leading, growing, and I got here not by screaming or fighting or burning bridges. I got here by knowing when to stay silent, when to document, when to speak, when to walk away. The Ashfords wanted to erase me. Instead, I erased them, not from existence, just from my life. And that silence, that distance, that's not cruelty, that's peace. The final Sunday dinner I attended with them, Patricia said I wasn't good enough. She was right about one thing. I wasn't good enough for them, because I deserved better. And now I have it. That's the real victory, not revenge, not even justice, just knowing my worth. And never letting anyone make me question it again. They never contacted me again, and I never looked back. What would you do in this situation? Have you ever had to walk away from people who were supposed to love you? Have you ever had to choose yourself when everyone else wanted you to stay small? Drop a comment below and share your story. And if this resonated with you, if you've ever felt like you weren't good enough for someone else's standards, hit that subscribe button. Because you deserve to hear stories about people who chose themselves. You deserve to know that walking away isn't giving up, it's leveling up. Thanks for being here. Thanks for listening. And remember, you don't need anyone's permission to know your worth. You already have it.